everyone, I'm Miss Lydia from the Boston Library. Thank you so much for joining me for our Craft Friday project. Today we are going to be making pine cone animals. So I have a couple of examples here. We have our snowy owl right here. I have a fox, and what we're actually going to be making today is a bear, an owl, and a gnome. So the supplies that you need for these are pine cones. You can pick these up at the store this time of year, or you can find them outside. If you do find them outside, make sure you clean them carefully, make sure they're dry. They do tend to harbor lots of little bugs. And if you buy them, watch out, they do have some pretty sharp spikes on the back, so you want to be careful when you're handling them. You also need some felt, some cotton balls, scissors, googly eyes are optional, and some hot glue. So those are our supplies for the day. We're going to start with the owl. So you can use a bunch of different colors for your owl. This one I used all white for. The one that I'm going to show you today, I'm actually using some gray, and then I'm going to use some cotton balls to fill in the fuzz. So I first have to select my owl pine cone, and I'm going to look for one that has a fairly open pattern in here. So if you look at one like this, it's very closed in. This one has a lot more space between the pieces. That's going to work better for my cotton. So my first step here is to take my cotton ball and to pull it all apart. And then as I'm going to stick a lot of that cotton in. I'm going to go all the way around and stick as much cotton as I can fit in there. As you're going with this, make sure you're very careful of those spikes at the bottom of the pine cone pieces. They can really catch your fingers as you're sticking the cotton inside. So if you're doing this with small children, you might want to help them with this. Give them something other than their fingers to shove this cotton into that space. You could use a fork, you could use a toothpick just to poke it all in there so that you're not catching your fingers on those. Once you have your pine cone covered in cotton like this, you're going to pick out which part of it you want to be your front. So you kind of have to set it down, see how it sits, and then you're going to look for your most open area. Most pine cones lean one way or the other. In general, you want to be working on the face that leans this way so that you have more exposed area. This part leans back, I don't have as much space, and then my owl is going to be facing down. So then I'm going to be making a gray face and wings for this owl. So I have my piece of gray felt, and I'm going to cut out a teardrop shape like this for my wing. So once I have two teardrop pieces like that cut out, then I'm going to glue the wings on. With both my teardrop wings, I'm going to take just a little dab of glue at the top and stick these on the sides. And they don't have to stick down all the way. It actually kind of looks cool if those wings stick out a little bit to the side like that. And then there are two different ways you can make the face. With this one, I had a full solid piece. So you can see I have almost kind of like a cat-shaped face here with just those little tiny ears up at the top. Or you can cut out something that looks like eyebrows there. And you can use those at the top. So those are going to be my top piece. I'm going to glue those on. Underneath my owl's eyebrows, I'm going to end up cutting out two circles that are connected in the middle. I'm going to make those large enough that I can use some googly eyes for him. So I'm going to pick out my googly eyes first and then use that kind of as my template to cut around. And you can actually, if you want to, glue those down to your felt before you cut it. Just like that, and then I'm going to cut with a generous border around those. Once I have those cut out and relatively even, I'm going to glue them right underneath my eyebrows. And then from my yellow felt, I'm going to cut out another teardrop shape, much smaller than the wings for the beak. And I'm going to glue that right underneath my eyes. There is my finished owl. You could, if you wanted to, use a little bit more of that yellow felt and cut out a couple of little feet for him as well. There he is. The next animal I'm going to show you is going to be our bear. So for our bear, I'm picking up my biggest pine cone, and I'm going to be making a brown bear, so I'm going to grab 2 different colors of brown felt. I'm also going to need some black felt for his eyes and his nose. So I have my 3 colors of felt here. I'm going to be using my darkest color for his face, his arms, and legs. So I'm going to cut out, again, kind of basing it off of that cat shape, except that I'm going to round the ears for the face. Once I'm done with that, I have a bear head that looks like this. You want to think about having a scale like that with your pine cone. From that same color, I'm going to cut out 2 arms like this and 2 small feet that I can stick at the bottom, just like that. And then the details of his face, he needs this lighter color for his nose and for the insides of his ears. So I'm going to take this lighter color and I'm going to cut out another kind of oblong shape that's a little bit narrower at the top, a little bit wider at the bottom for his nose. So I have my slightly off-center, almost egg-shaped nose. That's going to go right like that on his face. So once I've got that done, I'm going to glue that on. So at this point, his face looks like this. Using that same light brown, I'm going to cut out 2 U-shaped, light, and very tiny pieces like this. Those are going to go inside of his ears. So you can see his face is starting to take some shape there. Then I'm going to cut an oval out for his nose out of the black and 2 small circles, or you could use googly eyes for this step as well for his eyes. Once I have his little tiny oval nose, I'm going to glue that on towards the bottom of my egg-shaped light brown piece. And my 2 little round black eyes, obviously above the nose. And there's my bear face. So after I've got that done, again, I'm going to figure out which way I want my pine cone to face. Again, kind of looking for it to lean back. That's where it's going to show up the best. So with my pine cone leaning away from me, I'm going to take my bear face and glue that onto the front that is facing me. So he ends up looking like that. And then he needs some arms and legs. So I'm going to take those longer pieces, glue those on either side, kind of like we did with the wings for the owl, so that they can kind of stick out a little bit too. There he is with his arms, and then those little tiny feet I'm going to glue into the bottom. These are really going to end up looking just like a bit of an extension of that pine cone. And there is my finished bear. You can make him any color that you want. You could make him a polar bear. You could even do a similar technique like this, fill it with the white cotton, and then use some white felt to make a polar bear. Or a black bear, whatever color you like. Our last project that I'm going to demonstrate is a gnome. So I have a red piece here, and I'm going to actually make a little gnome hanging ornament. So this one we're going to use a smaller pine cone for, and I'm going to hang it this way. So it's going to look like his beard. And I have my piece of red felt. It's a little bit tricky sometimes to get like a hat shape. So you can see I have a piece of felt that's fairly large. There's a slight curve on the bottom. The top edge doesn't matter too much because the way that I'm gluing this, you won't see that. So what I'm going to do is take that and I'm going to wrap it around my pine cone like that. And then I will twist that edge in and glue it so that it was going to come into a point at the top. Your hat doesn't have to come to a complete point because I'm actually going to end up using a cotton ball at the top of that. So before I close that up, I have a little bit of a hole, and you can use a piece of string. I have a twist tie. Whatever you have on hand will work. And I'm going to make a loop at the top. I'm going to stick that down inside of there, about to where I would want it to hang as an ornament. And then I'm going to glue that inside. And you want to make sure, of course, that your hook is pretty solidly in there so that if you are hanging it, it's going to stay. Once I have that done, I'm going to take a nice round cotton ball, or you could use a pom-pom too. And I'm going to glue that right at the top, just like that. So he's still missing one piece here, because at this point he doesn't look terribly gnome-like. He needs a nose. So I'm going to take a small brown pom-pom, light brown, and I'm going to glue it right at the bottom of my hat. You could add eyes into this too if you wanted to. But I'm just going to give him a little nose peeking out underneath that pine cone. There. Just like that. And then you have a little gnome ornament. Same thing with this one. You could use your cotton ball to stuff that if you want him to look a little bit more like a Santa Claus. You could give him a white beard as well. So there you have your little gnome. These projects are very flexible, so you can do any animal that you can come up with. So basically, if you have some brown felt, you can do foxes, you can do squirrels, you can do any animal that you can come up with. If you don't happen to have felt on hand, but you do have pine cones and clay, you can also make animals. So here I made a little hedgehog, just using some brown clay and some googly eyes and a little black pom-pom for his nose. So I gave him some legs. He had a bit of a different shape, so he had to be stabilized too. You have to kind of like make sure that you shape those legs so that he'll stand. But you can do this as well. So you could end up making penguins. You could do anything like that if you have clay on hand as well. So here you have a collection of pinecone animals and one ornament. You could actually turn any of these into ornaments as well if you just put a string at the top to hang them. Most of the pine cones will sit just like that, steady. But if you end up with one that's shaped like this, where it just won't sit because it still has that stem, you can either try to cut that off and flatten it, or you can just turn it into an ornament, something that's going to hang. If you have any questions, let us know. I hope you enjoyed this project, and we will see you next week.